Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on penetration testing for SaaS providers. It's the 22nd of January. It's a bit of a dull, wet day here, but let's get cracking and see what we've got in store today. Okie doke. So without further ado, I'll introduce myself. I'm Sophie Sayer, the Sales Director here at IT Governance. I've been with the group for about 15 years, not always in the cyber division. I started actually in the publishing division, where we have a whole portfolio of books and toolkits on things like information security and PCI, Cyber Essentials. It kind of complements our consultancy offering, as you can see here on the slide, pen testing and GRC2. I will just introduce you to our panelists, if that's okay. I'm joined actually by a couple of my colleagues, also from the cyber division. First up is Colin Raymond. Good afternoon, Colin.
Good afternoon. Thanks for everybody joining today. So I'm Colin. I'm the Divisional Director for Cyber. Been with the business for 4 years, but been running kind of sales functions for over 15. So I've been asked to come along more for that input on the client-facing requests. So what are our customer base currently looking for in regards to penetration testing? So hopefully I can give some kind of insight in what peers within the industries are doing. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Thanks, Colin. Next on the list is James Pickard, our Head of Security Testing. Good afternoon, James.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're well. I'm here as a technical lead in this webinar. I'll be talking you through some of the technical points and some pointers that we see, giving some experience of what we do see with SaaS providers and hopefully where you guys can potentially improve your security.
Perfect. Thank you very much, folks. So just to give you a bit of an idea of what we do here at IT Governance, in case we have some new listeners on the webinar today, I can see from the attendee list that we do have some new and existing customers. So forgive me if I'm repeating myself here, but we've been around for about 20 years. We have about 180 people working here. We have more than 12,000 clients across 5 continents, and we have a whole host of expertise, consultants on our books, trainers and subject matter experts too. We have the most comprehensive ISO 27001 product. Certainly our Fast Track product is one of our flagship products. So if anybody wants any more information on that, do let us know. There will be an opportunity for Q&A at the end of this. There's also a chat function, which I will go through shortly as well on this webinar. Also, just to add, we have, like mentioned earlier, software, books and standards. We have a whole division dedicated to that. We have e-learning and staff awareness available too to support your cybersecurity needs, cybersecurity services and privacy services. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, everything that we offer. Again, just to give you some statistics on the kind of things that we've achieved in our 20 years of business. So we have more than 1,300 projects to help organisations prepare for and maintain their 27001 compliance. We have more than 15,000 privacy and cybersecurity training course delegates. We have issued over 7,000 CE certifications, and we have more than 2,000 customers that use our governance, risk and compliance software. So yeah, that's just some key highlights there, and of course some logos of companies that we are working with, and we are very proud of those. So just some housekeeping for this webinar this afternoon. It's expected to last just slightly under an hour. We're going to have a presentation from James that should last about half an hour to 45 minutes, and then we'll leave some time at the end for questions. I have got access here to the question function, so if you want to pop them in, you can start doing it from now or as the webinar continues, and we'll try and get to as many of those as we can. If we don't manage to answer them all, then we will follow up with you after this webinar. So you're all muted. You can submit your questions, and importantly, we'll email you a copy of the presentation slides afterwards and the recording, so you can always watch back if you need to. So getting ahead here with the knowledge share. The webinar agenda for today is SaaS providers building trust internally and externally, to test or to tolerate the drivers behind pen testing, the service suite. So we're going to talk about everything that we offer in our pen testing line of business. We're going to have a fireside chat, sharing some experiences, and then the roadmap to success, starting your journey here with us at IT Governance. Okay, we're just going to have a quick poll, if that's okay. So this is your opportunity to be interactive with us. We've got 3 questions. The first one is, how does your organisation currently secure SaaS applications? So if you can answer that for us, that would be great. We'll give you about 30 seconds to do that. It should just have popped up on your screen now. I can see some of the early answers coming in, which is quite interesting. Perfect. I'll just give you a few more seconds on that one. Perfect. The next question is, which compliance standards are your SaaS platforms required to meet? So we've got some standards and regulations here. 27001, PCI, GDPR, DORA, or other. So if you can answer that for me now, the question should be on your screen. Oh, I can see 27001 scoring quite high on this, which is good news for us because it is at the heart of our business. Okay, just a few seconds longer on that one, and then we shall end the poll. It definitely looks like 27001 has won that one. Perfect. We'll end that poll. And the next one, the final one, what's your biggest challenge with penetration testing? So we've got budget, lack of expertise to decide what to test, time constraints, unsure of its value, or other. So it should be appearing on your screen around about now. Okay, you can see over 40% of you have voted, over 50%. Looks like budget again has scored pretty high on that one. So it looks like budget potentially is the biggest challenge. Perfect. A few more seconds. I can see over 60% have voted now. Great. We'll close that one. Thank you so much. Brilliant. Okay. You can relax now. That's all the questions done. So we're moving into our first section of the webinar this afternoon. SaaS providers building trust internally and externally. So I'll hand over to our subject matter expert, James. Over to you.
Thank you, Sophie. So I'll start off with a little introduction. What is a SaaS platform? Most of you will already know this as you signed up to this webinar, but basically it's a product which is internet accessible generally and accessed over multiple devices or platforms. They're normally hosted in the cloud to help with scalability, and normally as a pay-as-you-go or a monthly yearly fee model where you'll gain access to a service. They can be business to business, or they could be B2C as well. Let's go to the next one, please, Sophie. So what data is held on a SaaS platform? You've got a lot of customers trust you with a lot of sensitive data. It could be emails, accounts, addresses, names, personal details as well. Depending on what your SaaS platform provides, it could be HR information, it could be financial information, it could even be healthcare information. So protecting this correctly, or protecting your SaaS platform, securing your SaaS platform is really important to your business. It also contains other things like operational and business data. It'll have a record of the customers that you have in there. It'll also have such as purchase histories. This could be relevant for a competitor of yours to see which other customers you're targeting or who your customer base is. You've also got application-specific data. Most SaaS platforms we see have some kind of logging, so it will see sort of user data, who's logged in, or records of people logging in, where their usage of time has been spent, so they can perform sort of trend analysis and look at the performance. Like I covered in the first sentence, there's also sensitive data in there, depending on what your application does. So why is building trust externally important? So trust by your end users, your customers, other businesses is really important. It's kind of the backbone of the product, really. If they do not believe that the service is secure and you're looking after their data, then yeah, they might join it, but will they stick around for it? Will they keep using that platform, or will they look elsewhere? They are trusting you with their data and for you to protect them. So if you guys have a breach, that has a massive knock-on effect on those as a client or a business. We're seeing that a lot of companies are increasing their due diligence through supplier questionnaires and validating, not only through testing, but also through ISO controls and other frameworks like Cyber Essentials. Do you have a data loss protection policy? What do you have in place in terms of these? So these are becoming a lot more thorough, as we say. We're also starting to see that if you present yourselves to the clients with a secure place at the point of that supplier questionnaire, you often gain their trust a lot further than if you have to go acquire something. So if a new client is requiring you guys to have a pen test and you can provide the results to them straight away, then that's fantastic. They will have trust in you. Whereas, is security an afterthought? Is they doing this because they have to do it, kind of thing, which is not always the case. So that's sort of your end clients. Can you go back a slide, please, Sophie?
Sorry,
So
yeah, of course.
building trust internally is really important as well. So having the staff, your salespeople, trust that product is really important. It enables them to sell it, believe in the product, and having the right security around it prevents a lot of potentially customer complaints, dealing with issues around this. It often helps there'll be SLAs as well. So if you do have an issue, then it may affect the sort of things that you've got on screen. Threat actors are generally after three things, or they're looking for to compromise the data, so affect the confidentiality, manipulate the data, so make it unusable or make it incorrect, or affect its availability. So that could be malware to encrypt it, or could you take your service, your platform down offline through denial of service attacks, or is there vulnerabilities in there that could restrict access to certain parts of the application? Not only does it help build internal trust, but if you guys come to sell the product at the end, or you're part of an acquisition or buyout, having a good strategy in place is it bodes really well in these scenarios. So it boosts your value of the product if you can prove that the application has robust security. So we're going to move on to test or to tolerate the drivers behind the testing. If we can move to the next slide, Sophie, please. Thank you.
There we go.
Behind it. So what are the drivers behind it? So obviously clients sign into the application, they use the application, they upload the data. Often these are multi-tenanted applications. So what that means is you don't have a separate database for each client. That client shares one database, and there's access controls should be preventing one user accessing another person's data. So client A could they access client B's data? Could they affect essentially the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of that data for that client? You've got the supply chain, which we've kind of covered a little bit already. So the supplier forms that come out, obviously these are getting more intense. Everyone's feeling the pushback from that. But not just in the supplier forms, but they're also increasing the technical requirements within the supplier forms. So enforcing multi-factor authentication, having a strong password policy, and being able to be flexible around this, because different companies will require different security measures. So being able to increase the password complexity could be a really important part of that application for that end user to meet their criteria. The other thing with SaaS platforms is they're always evolving. They don't stand still. There's new functionality being added, whether that's to make it easier for a user to use or adding extra functionality in there to expand that platform. And it's really important to test that. You don't want to be introducing new vulnerabilities into this environment, or you don't want to be not just introducing them, but also you don't want to be missing them as well. There's obviously a lot of compliance reasons around this. So if you are a SaaS provider, you will fall under things like GDPR, ISO 27001 potentially if you want to go towards that standard. There's DORA as well, which has come out, and also PCI if you're dealing with subscriptions. So there's a number of factors which you guys need to think about when you are on your journey through that SaaS, throughout your business. There's also third-party integrations as well, which happen. These can be chat features to the application. It could be your payment gateway as well. So there is those sorts of things to think about. How secure is that supply chain of that? How are you validating your integration? Are you using AI now, or are you using other people's AI models? Where is that data being stored? Where is it going to? So you performing your own validations in this is really important from there, and making sure they do their own testing. And if they don't, question why they're not doing it. So what are the risks to a business risk to a SaaS platform? You've got defacement. So essentially an attacker could deface the platform, change the content, upload new content to it that wouldn't be in line with your standard offering. It could be a malicious content within there. They could take the platform down, so make it unavailable. And that might not just be through denial of service attacks, because a lot of cloud providers prevent against these. It could be using functionality already within the application. So for example, if you've got a hard lockout for users, or if the user forgets a password, they can only do reset once. There's not a soft lockout within these, which could result in a lot of issues in terms of availability. If there is a data breach, there's the cost of the data breach. It's not just the fines, it's the investigation, it's the loss of customers, the reputational damage. There's a lot of factors to build into a breach. It's not just the simple things that you see on top. You may have to pay for third parties to come in to help evaluate it and contain the threat as well. So if we're going to move on to sort of the service suite, essentially, so if we can just move along. So we offer a number of services around SaaS platforms, and these are bespoke to you. And it's really important that we sort of get involved in the scoping calls so that we are mapping the right solution to you. So a common question that we get asked: when is the right time to book a test? Before you go live with the product is a great time. After major releases, the minimum standard is generally annually with this. So building this in is really important to your environment. So when to book it, it's not just when you're ready. You've got to bear in mind there's lead times from the pen testing side, pen testing companies as well. They generally operate a 6 to 8 week lead time. So making sure you're building this into your secure development plan is really important. So you are getting it in at the right time, you're not rushing it, you're getting the right service from the right people. So scoping belong the initial solution. So essentially a lot of companies we deal with start off with, we need a website test. Okay, excellent. What does the website use? What functionality is there? Is there an API that runs in the background? Yes, there's an API in the background. Would you like that testing? Yes, that would be really useful to have that tested. Okay, excellent. Is there anything else that communicates into this platform? Yes, there's mobile applications as well. So another interface of how customers use it. There can also be separate apps as well. So you can have multiple apps talking into one database or backend, just under different URLs essentially. So making sure you are not testing just the minimum, just that front door, to make sure you are testing it, because we often find that once we start testing and we start testing the web application, for example, that's where the platform started out. There's generally quite good security around that, but API is a new functionality and it hasn't been tested or it hasn't been covered. And this is where we generally find some more of the interesting vulnerabilities at the moment. So what I want to do is just go through the products in a little bit more detail with you, if that's okay. So IT Governance, we are a CREST accredited company. We've been CREST accredited for 11 years now, and we use very experienced staff, all UK based, to deliver our testing. When we perform these tests, we follow standard methodologies. So it's really important that you validate what methodology you want your application to test against. OWASP for the web application is the most common testing methodology, and they do publish the sort of top 10 vulnerabilities which are affecting companies each year, and it is interesting to see how those do change. They do map how they change them throughout the years. So with web apps, it's really important to think of sort of user levels. So what user levels are using the application? Okay, you've got end users. You may have managers of those end users if you have that. You also may have your internal staff may be able to come in and manage it as like a system admin or a client admin as such. So testing these functionalities is really important, but understanding why you're testing them as well. So you'd probably test from an untrusted position, such as your clients, because they are completely untrusted in your application. That's really important to make sure they can't access data outside of their privilege. They can't insert vulnerabilities. They can't file upload and upload malicious malware into your application. There is the correct antivirus checks in there. They are storing that data securely in potentially S3 buckets. So are those S3 buckets actually secured? So looking at all these different elements is really important from it, because that's all from someone that potentially could sign up, or you've given them or allowed them access. When you sort of move up the ladder and you go to sort of system admins, you kind of know the risk. So if you've got a system admin on there, you know that they could delete the data. You know that they have full control of the application. You guys understand the risk that if a system admin did go rogue or that account was compromised, that it wouldn't be a pretty place for you guys to be in. So testing that from that role doesn't necessarily always make sense, because there isn't access controls in place. They do have access to everything. So you could always test from the basic user to the admin to make sure the right access controls are in place to prevent these attacks. So having access to that system admin, you might not necessarily test from it, but being able to see what functionality they have access to will allow us to do tests to make sure that a basic user, a manager user, can't access these. And these are really big fundamental vulnerabilities. Also, when you're getting testing, making sure you're getting 2 accounts or 3 accounts, depending on where you are. So if you are with a client, you want to test client A and you want to test client B, it's not only the risk of vertical privilege escalation, but also horizontal. So can they get to that other people's data? Are those access controls in place? Not just on the interface, but can they access other files? We've had a great example where you can access other people's invoices. So you can see every company's invoice throughout the application, just by changing a few numbers in the URL through a vulnerability called direct object referencing, which is what we tend to find in the next sort of testing, which is the API side of things. So if you could move to the next slide, please. So with the API, we follow the same methodology as the web app testing. We follow the OWASP testing methodology. They fit very, very well together. We are testing for similar things, but obviously the API calls off the back end of the application, so it's not the user necessarily starting with the API, but it's used by the application. So what happens if you do remove those cookies? Does that still work? If you remove that authorization token, can you still access that functionality? And quite often time we'll find endpoints which are unauthenticated and can be accessed by an unauthenticated user. Yes, you need to know and build the request, but it's really important that you do check and verify that they can't pull a lot of information out of the API as well. The other side of the API testing is clients may use this directly. So they may want to use your API to feed data into this application. So testing that API to make sure you do have sanitization within those fields. So when you do put in cross-site scripting within the API, that it doesn't execute within your web browser or to your admins. So checking those and validating those sort of checks is really, really important to go through there. With the APIs, we find a lot of vulnerabilities called IDOR in secure direct object referencing, which is basically where objects in the database are referenced by numbers. So you'll have ID1, which will refer to, or user ID1, which will refer to the first user, user ID2, which will refer to the second user. These are often displayed within URLs where you could change them. So if you browse to your user management page, it often comes up with user ID1 in the title. If you change that to user ID2, do you access their information? Can you change their password? Okay, excellent. So user ID1's a admin and user ID2 is a basic user. Okay, so if I change the password of user 1, then can I have admin control over that environment? And that can be the case. That is often the case that we can do this. So it's very important to get that validation, because you are often, SaaS providers are using third parties to help with the development process. So it's very good that they say they use secure coding practices and things like that, but are they validating what they put in place secure? So moving on to the next one, which is mobile applications. Mobile applications are obviously run on mobiles, tablets, phones, anything along those devices. And we follow, again, the OWASP mobile application testing methodology. And they cover a similar set of functionalities or requirements as the web application, but they're more focused towards the mobile device. So on the mobile device, is it possible or does the data get stored on that mobile device? Is it encrypted? So when you log in or you upload files or you download files or you're using that application, is that user's application database or that application database actually encrypted? Could another application access it? Is there preventative controls around that? Is it using encryption? Is it using the same API? There's all these questions. Is the functionality of a web app, the mobile app, the same as the web app? Often we find that a mobile app has slightly more limited functionality than the web app itself. So making sure you're testing all the API calls is really important. And there's also the sort of input validation along those lines. And then we sort of move to the next area of this. So this is kind of building out the testing plan and making it a more defensive depth approach. So, and then you go into what's it hosted on? Where is it hosted? Is it hosted in the cloud? Okay, if it's hosted in the cloud, what are you using in the cloud? Are you using the databases? Are you using the storage facilities? How are you protecting that? So not just the external, essentially the old school external IP addresses it's running on, there is those checks, but also the best practice configuration against the portals. So if you're using AWS or Azure, do you have multi-factor authentication against your admin accounts? Are you implementing those same security functions across into this environment as well to create that full security layers? So people, if they do get in, there is restrictions on what they can do or how they can operate. Things we can look for is sort of secure patching, secure configurations. Is there any information leakages? Are you running the website on port 80 as well as port 443? Are you using the right encryption? Are you using the latest secure methods to do this? So there's so many different things to think about when we talk about SaaS providers, and it's really important to factor in all these things, but also factor in where are your biggest risks. You guys have also talked about budget being an issue, so factoring in how to spend that budget the most effectively is really important. And it might not be that you follow the full testing methodology. Maybe you are concerned about specific areas of the application or specific types of tests you're worried about. So you can really channel and pinpoint with the help of Sophie Collin, myself, and the further teams to identify that scope which is appropriate for your budget and give you the best results possible for it. So I wanted to go on to the next part, which is essentially talking about our experience with SaaS platforms and different ways that we engage with customers. So we have a great customer. They offer a fantastic application, and basically what they do is they buy a bulk amount of days from us. They don't necessarily assign the testing to it straight away, but throughout that year, well, on one day of the year, they'll buy 10 days from us, for example. They'll then do their annual pen test, which will take 6 days, and they'll have 4 days in the bank. These 4 days are used throughout the period when they do major and minor releases. So we'll sit down with them and we'll agree the scope when they start designing that next phase. So we'll agree the scope that they want to change their, they want to add an upload facility, was an example, where instead of manually entering data, they can put it through in an Excel spreadsheet, and they wanted to validate the security mechanisms within that. So we sat down and we discussed whether we thought it was a big minor change or a big change to the application, and we agreed that it was a minor change because of the testing or the security controls that they put in place. So we agreed that we wouldn't do a report for them, we'd do an email summary, and we do the testing as in place. So they've got the proof that we've done the testing, but they're not spending the time doing the report writing at the same time. So we tested this, and then we found a number of issues with it. So then they pulled off that same amount of 10 days, they've got 3 days left. They pulled off some retesting a week later, which then addressed the vulnerabilities. They then moved on and did a major change, we classed it, because they changed their authentication mechanism. So we wanted to validate that they were all secure that way, and they wanted a report out of that. So we used the remaining days to do that. They then went to go and purchase some more days from us. So this is a great example of how you can save costs is by buying bulks of days. If you buy a bulk of days, you generally get a better discount on the day rate or a better rate throughout that period, which is really useful for that client because it does lock them down into what they're paying, and they know what each engagement roughly will cost them. There is a little bit back and forth with the client. We do sometimes not always agree whether it's a major or minor change, but we do come to a resolution which fits both sides of us, so we know that we're doing them a good service and they're getting what they want from it at the back of it. Other clients buy it bit by bit. So they'll come and say, we want our annual test, and then they'll come back and they'll do little pieces of information throughout the year. We also do pen test programs for other clients as well. So instead of testing everything all at once, which can be a lot for internal teams, you guys will probably know that there is resource issues across many IT teams and development teams. So testing everything all at once isn't actually always the best way to do it. And we will separate the tests up into stages. So for example, if we want to focus on the web application, that'll be stage 1 with the API in the background. We'll then test the other part of the API a month or 2 later. So it gives them a window opportunity to remediate. We can retest without overwhelming the customer with issues. At the end of the day, you don't want to be flooded with a massive pen test report with loads of different issues and not not sure where, prioritize those issues. When we do these multi-stage engagements, it spreads it out. And when we do them all together, we try and do an executive summary, which will summarize the biggest issues for you in a separate report as well. So there is those options along the way. I don't know if Colin's got anything he wants to input at this point.
Well, a couple of things to add. One is I think I need to get you in front of more accounts, because obviously you explained that extremely well. So maybe another role for you to pick up. No, I think, like James says, I think it's all about options at the end of the day. Obviously, James is a technical expert and he's going through the details of what we deliver. But from my perspective of how we engage with our customers and our accounts, is we want to be as flexible as possible to support your needs at the end of the day. One of the things that we pride ourselves on is that flexibility, but also the consistency that we offer. It's very easy for companies to say, well, we can do this whenever, for how long. It's being able to pick that up at a later date. So what James speaks about, where things are getting changed over time, things have been added to, we've got a very, very strong quality and peer review process. So someone's not just standing on their own in the pen testing team. They've got the management system, they've got the processes in place that we build on, obviously the ISO 27001 processes. But this gives us that consistency that if you were to come back to us and say, look, we have got a minor change, a large change, or even we just need help from you, you know that we've got a record of what we've delivered in the past and we can kind of build on that. So it's an ongoing relationship that we can change to suit the requirements for the testing needs. But no, what James went through is a great example of obviously what we do for our current account base.
Can I just chime in, James, on a couple of those things? So absolutely agree with what both of you are saying, and I've got customers on both sides of the fence that, you know, that do both of those options that you're talking about. They buy bulk hours from us, and they also book in pen tests as and when they need them. There's so many benefits of both. I think certainly for my customers that the bulk buying helps them budget on their side, and it also gives them like a level of reassurance that actually if there is something going on, you know, they can just you can pick up the phone and we've got a consultant, and you know, it's kind of dealt with much quicker than having to sort of start from scratch. So that's a real big benefit for you, and also for us internally. It kind of helps us plan resource a little bit better. So yeah, there's so many benefits of each. I think budget for me, and certainly from what I hear from my customers, is definitely the way to go if you want to set out your, you know, a lot of companies will be doing budgets now this time of year anyway, but you know, you've got a certain amount set aside for pen testing. You know, we can have it on your account and just use it as and when you need it. So perfect. I can, just whilst I'm off mute, I can see some questions popping in the chat, which we'll come to in the Q&A. So keep them coming if you can. It would be nice to hear from all of you. James, are you happy for me to move on to section 5 of the webinar?
Yeah, of course.
Perfect. So the roadmap to success. Over to you, James.
I think this is Colin's actually.
Colin, yeah. You're back on.
Back on, exciting. Well, it's kind of there's a bit of a repetition in here, but that's okay because I think we can go into a bit more detail. So it's about, how do we engage with our customers, our accounts, and the thing is about open and transparency and looking at what you require. So collaborative scoping, which means if you come through to one of the account managers here at IT Governance, obviously we will support and talk through what your needs are, and this can kind of be reactive, it can be planned, it could be budgeted, as like Sophie says, but don't feel that you're not going to get that technical expertise. One of the things that, again, we're very pleased that we were able to do is we were able to get technical expertise. We'd be able to get the actual pen testers on the call with us, so that we can talk to the accounts, we can pinpoint things. Like James says, if we want to look at something specific, or we want to kind of scope something out, then we can do. Regards to then we go into the technical and business alignment. It obviously looks at broader risks, the holistic view of everything that when it comes to pen testing. One of the things that we kind of reference there is certainly it's the communication. It's the communication throughout. Is we don't just try and obviously sell a specific product and go, right, that's it, that's the end of it. What we want to do is have that continuous conversation going with you. So what will happen is when we send obviously the statement of work or obviously the scope document, we will obviously present that to you to go, right, does that cover what you need? Is there something else that you'd like to add? Is there something you'd like to remove? Is there something that you'd like to have an additional focus on? And James mentioned before things like time limited. So you can actually time limit the tests in areas where you feel that obviously the priority is. So obviously we have a detailed scoping document, which will outline all the systems, network tests. So if you're looking certainly for when we do the internal tests, all the team will get a good amount of detail from you in regards to what is in your infrastructure. We don't want to miss anything. We want to make sure we're both clear. We want to make sure that we can be as efficient as possible, because that's the other big thing, efficiency. We don't want to be wasting your time. We don't want to be wasting our time on the test. So we need to make sure that they're absolutely worth our while, and that comes back to budget and return on investment for doing it. Once we engage and we agree a course of action, we agree that this is how we're going to deliver, this is the kind of product type, this is the focus that we want to cover off. We've obviously got pre-engagement consultation. That's really important to us. So that's when effectively, if you haven't met the tester already, the tester will come on a call to discuss the upcoming test. Things may have changed. The world's changing all the time. It may be a case that we have requested that some whitelisting has been implemented, because obviously we don't want to be blocked for the testing parameters. So maybe there might be some issues there that we want to talk through. If we're on site, it's useful to kind of know that when we get to the car park, you have to turn left because that's where everybody plays. Little intel like that makes the time most valuable. So we have a detailed call there. I don't know if it's on a future slide, but I just want to reference point as well. But again, we'll be keeping a log of all this information. So as we're going through this process, everything is recorded, everything is documented. So it's all very detailed for you. And then obviously when the delivery comes in, obviously that's when you obviously get the reporting matrix and everything else like that. So the engagement process, James, are you picking this back up, or is that me? I can't remember.
Yeah, that's fine. So generally when we're testing, we'll do the pre-engagement call, which Colin's covered. On the day of testing, we'll email you to make sure that you guys are still okay for the testing to go ahead today, and essentially notifying you that you will be seeing testing traffic. Testing will be performed against the agreed methodology, which is OWASP generally for the web app side of things, and OWASP again, but the mobile testing side of this for the mobile applications. During this, we will identify issues, vulnerabilities, and we'll use a mixture of vulnerability scanners, but we'll also use manual testing as well. I've seen a question coming around this, so we can cover that one off a little bit later. And essentially, we use these to build a list of issues. We score them against using CVS version 3 at the moment. If you do want CVS version 4, we can also do that as well. And we rate these against this, which will essentially be how does it affect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of that data. Depending on these results and how easy it is to exploit, for example, what factors are taken into place during the exploit of this issue, we'll grade this depending into critical, high, medium, or low. Generally, during testing, we'll immediately notify you guys once we've got a proof of concept working of a critical or high vulnerability. This will essentially allow us to give you a live demo if you'd like of it, or provide you screenshots or a walkthrough of that vulnerability. If it's something that doesn't affect the application massively, let's say you've got SQL injection on one of the fields, which would allow us to access the database and read data from there. If you want to put that filtering in place during that testing to prevent those SQL injection attacks, as long as you agree with the tester, we should be able to retest that live for you, so you wouldn't necessarily need to pay for retesting at that point. At the end of testing, we normally do a debrief, a run through of the vulnerabilities that we found, discuss some of the issues as well that we found, because we can exploit it, but we don't always know the risk of exploiting it. So we can access other data, or we can see other things. It's really important to have that two-way conversation to go, actually, that piece of information is really business critical. Other users shouldn't be able to access that information. So having those does affect the report, or can affect the report at the end. It doesn't affect it much. It may grade a vulnerability one higher or one lower, but that's the extent that we go through with it. We then do a report. So our reports are split into 3 sections. You have an executive summary. This is aimed at C-suite or management, essentially covering the business risks of those vulnerabilities. We then have section 2, which is testing details, which will define the scope, what user accounts were used, and discuss the methodologies. And from there, then we have section 3, which is the technical details, along with the consultant's commentary. So the consultant's commentary are things that may not make a vulnerability, but could be seen as an issue or something you may want to address. And then this report, once formulated, will go through a quality assurance process. This goes through peer review, a copy edit stage, and then also a management review as well, to make sure that it is up to the standard that we want you guys to receive. The report normally takes 10 working days after the testing is complete, so it's important to factor that into your testing lifecycle. We can get these out quicker if required. So if you do have a need to get these out quicker, and you do let us know up front, we can make that process slightly quicker. Sophie, back to you, I think.
Thank you, James. That was perfectly presented. So just to let you folks know that we've got some free pen testing resources. So you can see them on your slide now. And when you receive the slide deck, you'll be able to click through on the orange buttons and download for read at your pleasure. So do enjoy that. We have also got 15% off pen testing for all of you lovely attendees this afternoon. So if you would like us to scope a pen test for you, then we would love to hear from you. If you have an account manager here with us at IT Governance, do contact them now. They are expecting your calls and emails. If you don't, then you can email us there with the address and you'll come through to one of us. We'll make sure that you're looked after and your needs are met. So yeah, 15% off you all. It's a bit of a one-off offer. It's not advertised on the website. It's exclusive to you. If you want it, you need to take it up before the end of January. So there is a deadline on that. So do get your questions and scoping needs in ASAP if you can. Okay, so this is a slide on how we can help. I know James has gone over lots of these tests in the presentation. Do you want to say any more on them, James?
No, I think that's enough about products. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, so they're the products that we offer here. Do get in touch, like I said, and the likelihood is we will be able to help you. We are going to move now to the Q&A section. Look at that, bang on time. We're motoring along quite nicely, so that's great news. I can see some questions popping in the chat. I'll just start from the top, and we'll work our way through as many as we can in the next 10 minutes or so. So a question for you, James, if that's okay.
Yeah.
How does a vulnerability scan differ from a pen test? We've got a customer on the webinar this afternoon that's considering a pen test, but obviously I'm sure you're going to explain the differences to us now, if you don't mind.
Yes, sure. So this is a really important sort of differentiation between them. A vulnerability scan will go in and look for things that it knows. It will look for vulnerabilities in a database that it knows. It won't be able to look or identify things outside of that. It might not even be able to analyze that it's accessing data outside its resource, because as a vulnerability scanner, it might not know what it's supposed to see. So there is a chance that it will miss vulnerabilities within here. It also won't combine vulnerabilities. So if there is sort of a information disclosure, it then won't and use that knowledge to then go further into the application to try to exploit it. So you could have an information disclosure where it reveals user IDs or strings or different different values, which then you can use in other parts of the application to manipulate that to get more information, such as a password, out of it, or it won't be combining these. There is benefits to doing both. We probably always advise that you do an annual pen test, and that's pretty much industry standard that you do a pen test annually, and a vulnerability scanner there to back it up throughout the year, so you don't have that extensive cost throughout that year. So you are monitoring your application, you're seeing that things aren't changing. It is a cheaper way of doing some sort of validation of your application, but if you're using APIs and things like that, when we're testing APIs, we always ask for working examples of these APIs, for example. So we want to start from a known good point of it working. So we're getting the OK acceptance code along with the actual right data coming back that we're asking for, and then we start the manipulation of those API calls. Often vulnerability scanners won't ask for these because they can't feed it in to the application to make it work as such. So if you are testing it from scratch and you're using values and parameters, they all have different date formats, for example. The vulnerability scanner wouldn't know what date format to use to make sure it gets the right response. So there's lots of articles online about the differences between vulnerability scanning and pen testing. For me, there's definite benefits of doing the pen tests because you are getting a human to validate. We use vulnerability scanners as well internally to help us find vulnerabilities, but it's not something that we don't always rely on it. So we do a lot of the manual testing ourselves to make sure that they are right. There's also factors in there that they could flag up false positives or false negatives. So they could flag up an issue which isn't actually an issue, and you have to then go in and decipher this yourself. Essentially, do you have the time and resource skill to analyze those results of the vulnerability scan to make them into a way that you guys can recreate that issue using proof of concepts, and do you know what fix will come out of it? Because a lot of vulnerability scanners contain a lot of issues, and they are quite complicated as well. So there is those. I don't know if
yeah, that's great, James. And just to add to anyone on this call who is, because it is quite normal for when our customers come to us that people are shopping around, and absolutely we encourage you guys to do that. But often what we find is that customers like yourselves are coming to us, they've had a quote from somewhere else, which is often using an automated tool or a vulnerability scanner, as James just described, and we're comparing that to a pen test, which of course it isn't the kind of same. It's not the same parameters. It's not the same. It's not comparing like for like, basically. So it's always important to remember that as well. Okay. Next question. I think you may have already answered this, James, but just for the sake of this attendee, which testing methodologies do you use?
So there's lots of different ones out there. OWASP is the one we use for web application. So I can try and put a link in the chat to OWASP. They do mobile application as well. And we use a mixture of other ones for different tests as well. We choose whatever is most suitable to that testing or that test that the client requires.
Yeah, if you could pop a link in the chat, that would be fantastic or really helpful. I'm just going to do one last question because I'm aware the time is ticking a little bit. So one last question, and if there's anything else that hasn't been answered, we will come back to you after this webinar. So the last question: what are the biggest differences between normal web app testing and SaaS and testing for SaaS providers? I don't know whether, James, you want that or whether you want to fill that to Colin, or what would you prefer?
Yeah, I'll fill it to Colin. No, I'll pick that.
Just making sure he's not.
Yeah, no, thank you for that one.
So that completely depends on the application that you're talking about and the SaaS platform that you're using, if you define it as a SaaS platform. essentially we follow the same testing methodology. It's just the scope might be slightly different. What is integrated, what isn't in scope, what is in scope, what's important to the customer, figuring out what aspects, what aspects you're trying to do, what's in that sort of risk register for you to go, right, we really need to make sure this is protected. It's just about having that scoping exercise to make sure we're validating and getting exactly what you want from testing.
Thank you very much. That was really well put. Thank you, James, and thank you to Colin. You've been in very safe hands this afternoon, everybody, because you've had the head of testing and the head of cyber division. So you couldn't have had more of an input. So thank you both, and thank you all for attending this afternoon. Like I said at the very, very start of this webinar, we will email you the slides afterwards, so you'll have a copy of those. That's all of the ways that you can get in touch with us on the slide below. And all that remains to say is thank you very much for your time, and I hope to see you all again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.